So a friend of mine shared this meme of how each Archon screws up their own citizens. Venti is often loose with the rules, and that's what leads to this kind of outcome. Zhongli is considered a pretty reliable leader, so it's understandable he has this father figure image and a pretty positive approval rating. And A, well, she's come a long way, let's just leave it at that. But memes aside, it made me a bit curious about something. Do the Archons actually care about ruling, and how effective are they at actually running their own countries? If the title didn't tip you off, I won't be covering all the Archons here as they'll just be a 40-minute video, so instead we're gonna break this up to one video per Archon. In this one, I'm gonna go through Venti and Mondstadt. Before that, if you wanna see more lore videos, do consider subscribing and turning on notifications as we do weekly uploads on Genshin lore. Let's start with a bit of a history lesson. The Archon Wars were fought several hundred years ago prior to the events of the main story. After the war, 7 gods were chosen as winners and they each were given dominion over an area in Tevat where they could rule. Venti was one of these winners, and after toppling the storm god Decarabian, he was given the right to rule Mondstadt. Now if we look at Mondstadt's history as a snapshot, the meme has some truth in it. Venti, or as he was known back then, Barbatos, really had little to no involvement in how Mondstadt as a region and a city was run. After the Archon Wars, Venti was pretty much absent from the ruling decisions of the city, much less the entire region. He only made the decision to move the people from Storm Terror's lair to an island on side the lake. After this, he pretty much left the people of Mondstadt to their own devices. Now on the surface, this might seem to be because he was lazy or not interested in ruling. But in reality, the reasons of him abstaining from the seat of power has much to do with Mondstadt's long and oppressed history. You see, before Venti gained recognition and power as the Archon of Mondstadt, the people were ruled by Decarabian, the god I mentioned earlier. Under Decarabian's rule, the people were pretty much oppressed and controlled as Decarabian mistrusted others and was fearful of losing his rule. Most were practically trapped within his city, and the god of storms knew every person and everything that happened within his borders. Suffice to say, he was a bit of a control freak. This eventually led to a rebellion facilitated by Barbatos and his conspirators that led to the freedom of the Mondstadt people. Because of this history, Barbatos thought to never put the people he cared for so much in the same circumstances and allowed them to chart their own path. Sadly, this wouldn't last because while Venti gave them freedom, the power vacuum left by Decarabian's forceful departure would only cause another party to rise up in its place. Venti had hoped that the people of Mondstadt would be free, but instead the aristocrats filled that power vacuum and introduced an even more oppressive regime where the gap between the poor and the rich was even bigger. This whole aristocrat abusing power trip is largely why Eula's family, the Lawrence family, are very poorly looked upon today, but that's a whole other story. Eventually, it got so bad that Venti had to return to free the people once more, but this time taking on a slightly more behind-the-scenes role. He empowered certain figures like Vanessa and instigated a rebellion among people to wrest control back from the aristocrats. Having learned the lesson of why you shouldn't leave a power vacuum empty with no control measures, Venti actually worked to put in a few things to ensure something like this doesn't happen again. Despite all the chaos and literally 2 rebellions which costed Mondstadt countless lives, Venti still felt that the people were entitled to their freedom without some god telling them how they should live. However, after the aristocrat nonsense, he realized he couldn't just leave things as they are since someone would always try to take control. This is when he took a more active role in setting up Mondstadt's defenses. Firstly, he helped Vanessa, the instigator of the rebellion, in setting up the Knights of Favonius, which acted as a police force not answerable to anyone that was tasked with upholding the law for all citizens equally. He then established the Four Winds, a group that was entrusted with the protection of Mondstadt from larger threats. The group is comprised of Andreas, the Wolf of the North, the Knight of Favonius Grandmaster as the Lion of the South, Vanessa as the Falcon of the West, and Devalin as the Dragon of the East. Each is arguably the strongest of those living in Mondstadt and make very capable protectors for the region. After this, he yet again left the people of Mondstadt to live their own lives. Now, while most people will tell you that their Archon has disappeared for thousands of years and nobody has seen him, every so often you would hear stories of a bard helping those in need when they needed him most. In fact, the main reason we as players even bump into Venti was because he had returned to correct the problems that arise from one of the four winds, the Valin. He does this to help those in need, but wants to ensure that they don't attribute the help directly to Barbatos the god. I suspect the reason he does this is so that the people of Mondstadt will have their freedom and at the same time don't overly rely on him on solving their problems. So in reality, while Venti might seem to be indifferent to Mondstadt and its people, he has done quite a bit to ensure they remain as free as possible. This is because he understands and has seen firsthand the effects of oppression and how cruel people can get while in positions of power, in addition to understanding how difficult the freedom they now have was to achieve. While I don't think he is doing everything he could as a leader, I can see where his adherence to freedom comes from. Once you've experienced being oppressed or being a prisoner, most will not wish it upon others. So while he was given the right to rule over Mondstadt, given its history, I believe he chose the right path for its people. Or maybe he's just lazy and wants to get a drink and just sing. In any case, while Venti might be the least involved leader or Archon we've seen so far, he still had the best interests of the people of Mondstadt in mind. After all, he was more than willing to enter a war with a storm god while being just a small wind sprite, all in the name of freeing the people of Mondstadt. But that's it for this video. We will be covering Liyue and the Geo Archon in the next one, and if you're interested in that, do subscribe and we'll see you in the next video. As always, have a good day.